Hey there, everybody. It's another episode of Film Streak. Look, I'm recording this episode after 5 days of the Houston Latino Film Festival. And I tell you what, this has been an amazing year. Just being a part of the festival this year, seeing all the filmmakers that have come through, just getting to meet all the people that showed up, just attending and seeing the films. Oh man, this was such an experience. And don't say I didn't tell you. I told you in the previous episodes. I even told you last year. This is something you need to check out. And I want to take a minute to thank and just shout out all the filmmakers that I was able to talk to actually sit down and interview or have a discussion with, really. And it wasn't even so much of an interview, but just to talk to them about their film and give them a chance to express themselves and really dig into their work and let people know. You know, we recorded all these things, we filmed all these things, and they'll be posted at some point on the festival's website or on their YouTube page. You may even see some of it, I don't know, social media or something like that. We're going to work all that out. There was a lot of stuff we captured, but I just want to take a minute here personally to just thank all of these folks that I talked to. I mean, I can start from the very first day. We talked to some of the filmmakers that were there. We talked to Calma Carmona, who was our opening music act. And that was really cool because, not there with the film, but I was very interested to just get her perspective on the festival and, being a part of it and how it relates to her music career. Turns out she's actually going to be in a film. So that's something to maybe look forward to someday. I talked to Laura and Victor with Frida, which is a film I'll talk about in a little bit. But it was great to sit down with them and just kind of break down the film and their parts of it as producer and composer. Brad Corrigan with Ileana Smile. So it was very interesting to talk to him about that film. It's a very touching film, and I think it's a very personal film, and I'm glad he took a moment to really dig into that a little bit. It's a very emotional film for him, so I'm glad he took the time. Let's see, Kent and Kendra from $1 Million Cage. Wow, it was a moving documentary. I'm glad to see Kent as the subject of the film. He's got his life going in a great direction, and Kendra was there to make it into a film and bring that story to everybody. I even got to talk to a few people from The Long Game, which was probably the highest profile film of the festival. We had Julio Quintana, the director. We had Paulina. We had Christian, a couple of the actors that were in the film. Cheech Marin was also at the festival, but he made a very quick, very brief appearance. He did a Q&A after the screening. Didn't get to talk to him in any kind of a quieter setting, but it was great to talk to them, get their perspectives on the film and the story. There's a lot of Texas history involved. Them being from Texas, or at least being familiar with Texas, it was great to talk to them about that. Let's see, who else here? Sharon with In Tow. Oh man, that was a great short. It was very inventive and humorous, but also touching. And it was a great conversation, being able to break that down with her a little bit. Brittany, Over the Causeway. Wow. Brittany was just kind of a standout to me. Very unique and very authentic voice. And I feel like a voice that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. She's a young actor, and she's dedicated. So I feel that. I talked to Christopher and Augusto from The Grotto of Death. And these two guys surprised me in a real way, because so Christopher is a comic artist, and his work goes under the name of Pinko Joe. And wow, it was cool to meet him. I didn't realize that's who I was talking to until we started talking, and it was a trip in a way. But him and Augusto, they both talked about their film and his documentary about a Mexican comic artist who really had the whole scene had its peak in the 70s, and it was great to let them just tell that aspect of comic history and what those things mean to them. Alex Rosales from Search and Destroy. It was cool to just talk with him and just break down his inspiration for the story. It's a short, and it's a little bit of like a riff on the group of kids that are up to some things and getting into adventures and stuff. Let's see, who else did I talk to? Man, there's so many people. Amelia with Shadow. I got to talk to her about her short and the idea behind it, and even the process of making it. And it was interesting to see a little bit behind the scenes of that. Let's see, who else did I talk to here? Man, I got a list. I talked to Sarah with Cass, and who else? Gerardo with The Garden of Adam. And both of those directors, they were part of our Houston block. And being able to talk to them about their films, which are entirely different types of stories. And I also talked to Ellen, who was the producer on both of those films. So the three of them all kind of knew each other and worked together. And that was really cool. Gerardo, I want to say, like, that conversation I had with him, I know he was at the Houston Latino Film Festival, I think in 2018 with Rich Kids, if you've ever seen that. But that made its premiere at the festival. So that was really cool to see him back with his own film. He directed a short, and it was a very important film. It was talking about a very important topic for today. And unfortunately, it's still an issue that's going on with police and police brutality and how that affects families and the youth. I could tell. I mean, I know it means a lot to him. It means a lot to me as a father with children. It's something that it kind of hits you in the heart. And so it was great to talk to him about that. With Sarah, with Cass, it was cool to talk to her about how they made that film, because it's science fiction, but finding ways to make things happen and make things convincing for the screen. And maybe sometimes working with, different people, different resources to really pull that all together. It was cool to break that down with her a little bit. Let's see, who else here? It's Glenise with Super Hair, which, it was awesome. It was great to talk to her. I talked to her for a little bit about the film and the meanings it had for her, especially with understanding and accepting identity and how she connected with that story. And really, I guess that's the genesis of the story, the short that she did. But even afterwards, like off the mic, just talking with her about festivals and getting her perspective. It's cool to see people that have experience with other festivals and how they bring that to this festival. And me, I'm a little more maybe involved than most other people, so I'm curious to see like how people are enjoying it and what they're feeling, like even just being in Houston or being a part of the community here. So it was great to just talk to her and just get that perspective. Let's see, who else did I talk to? I talked to Miguel. So Miguel Salgado, he was the director of Shame. But once that was our winner for Best Feature. And so I tell you, it's pretty hard hitting. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it was good to talk to him. Look, my Spanish isn't great. And he preferred to speak in Spanish, and I appreciate that, and I respect it. So we had to work on our interview a little bit, but we got it. And so I was able to get some thoughts on his film. So I talked to Daniel with El Gato Feo. He was a director. That was the winner of the Best Texas Film for the festival. He had some really interesting perspectives on his story and how they had to shoot it. They were in a very remote location. And, sometimes that's good to hear, or it's good to understand like the challenges you face as a filmmaker or just as part of a production. Okay, so there was a feature there, and I'll talk about it in a little while. Itu Nino, the director, I want to say the name right. Intandui. I certainly hope I said that right. I enjoyed talking to her so much because her film is very deliberately done a certain way. It was great to talk to her about the process of making the film, the idea with the film, even the mindfulness of it, of monitoring and paying close attention to the carbon footprint of the production. Something you don't really hear about with most productions, right? even short films, which are usually much smaller in nature, you don't hear people really talk about like, hey, how much are we using? How much are we wasting? And this was a film that totally took that into account. It's part of the message of the film. I got to really see and hear her break that down for us. Let's see, who else did I talk to? Oh, of course, Montserrat with Allá. She was a director of Allá, and it was a great conversation with her. I enjoyed the film, but I enjoyed just as much talking to her and getting her perspective on it. It's an interesting film. It's about, well, I can talk about it later, but she's just fascinating. She's fun to talk to. And so I really appreciated her taking the time. We even talked as we were getting tacos at the food truck. It was so great. So let's see, who else did I talk to? I want to make sure I get everybody. Andrea and Guillermo from Meant to Be. It's a mix of a documentary and narrative. So it's like some reenactments of moments from Guillermo's life, but also mixed with interviews. And so it's given us a perspective of how this man lived his life and maybe lived it, let's say, dangerously, carelessly in some ways. And he ended up paying some prices for it. And yet he's found ways to turn himself around and make good and do something for the community. And so that's an important film, I think. Let's see, anybody else that I talked to here? I want to make sure I get as many people as I can. I don't know if there's anybody else, but I appreciate everybody that I did get to talk to on camera and get their thoughts. And we will, at some point, we will see those available somewhere, I hope. And I'll link to that maybe in a future episode. Maybe I'll even include some of those. I'll cut those into a new episode or like a little bit of a bonus. And I did that last year. I think that kind of worked out. That was kind of cool. So maybe we'll do that again. Along with all these filmmakers, along with all of the talent, all the creative people that have come through and just shown us great work and been able to talk about their work. There are plenty of other filmmakers that maybe I just didn't have the time to get to, or we just, other things are happening at the same time. So I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody who was there. And of course, the other thing is the team, right? The crew, the people that put this thing together. And every film festival has its staff and the people that are volunteers. But maybe it's just me with this festival, 8 years running now. It's still young, but this one, it's interesting to see that it feels like everybody's kind of growing together. You see a lot of familiar faces every year. Sometimes new faces come into the mix, and it's a really cool mix. It's people from all over Houston. Houston's a really diverse city, and I mean, you go in any of the four directions, and you're going to meet a totally different stripe of people. And yet we all find the common denominator with films and wanting to celebrate all this work and all this culture. So shout out to all you guys. I mean, man, if you're listening to this, hey, thanks for checking it out. Thanks for being down and at least giving it a listen. If you've made it this far in, hey, listen to the rest. Why not, right? But Julio, Jesus, JC, the guys I was working with to get the interviews and these conversations recorded and all that. Thanks for all your work, man. I appreciate it. I think it's really going to be good to showcase all these people that were at the festival with their work. The founders, of course, David, Pedro, you guys are doing some great stuff, and your vision, you're holding true to it, man. I tell you guys all the time, it's like, this is some real like noble work that you're doing. And I'm glad to see it keep going. And all the volunteers, I mean, there's so many to list. I don't know if I want to list anybody because I feel like I'm going to leave people out. I'm down for all y'all. I really got to say, I appreciate the festival allowing me to sit down with Carlos Lopez Estrada and let him just rock for, was it 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it was. I mean, it was cool to just dig into his work, dig into his style, his sensibility, how he comes to projects as a filmmaker, whether it's music videos or a TV episode or a feature film, and get his perspective on that, because I think a lot of the people that were there at the panel and at the festival in general, they're interested in films, of course, but they're interested in making films. And, this festival has done some really cool things with having workshops. There was a screenwriting workshop that morning. There was a workshop. I also talked to Dan, who did the workshop on color grading. And there's great resources there for filmmakers who maybe they're just getting their start, or maybe they just need to kind of pick up some new skills or just have a better understanding, And I think that's what that panel that I had with Carlos was not necessarily about how to do stuff, but understanding like how you can grow and how you can build a career. Because that's something that Carlos could really speak to, right? I did a lot of homework. I watched a lot of his videos, his features, some of those, I think, Blind Spotting and Lil Nas X, the Long Live Montero. I think you can see those on Max. I think that's where I saw them. That was something that it was cool to just sit down, talk with him, break down his experience and where he's still finding room to grow as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. He also talked about his Anti-Gravity Academy, which is it's sort of it's a production studio, I guess, but it's kind of an incubator for new and upcoming filmmakers who are maybe looking for some educational resources, looking for some tools, some ways to build financing or just get their projects off the ground. So it was great to let him just talk about that and go into it. And for all the folks that attended, thank you for showing up. Thanks for your great questions, and I appreciate him being there, of course. And for the festival, let me handle that for them. So maybe we'll do it again. I don't know. So anyway, let's talk about some movies, right? Okay, so I had to get some water. Sorry. My voice is a little bit blown out from that festival. Did a lot of talking and sometimes over some pretty loud music that was going on. We did our best with the audio. You might see when the interviews are out someday. Yeah, it got a little shouty in the room at some point, but we brought in some headphones and we tried to make it work. So here we are. We're going to talk about some of the films. I mean, I can start with Frida, which was the opening night film. What I really want to say about it, though, is, I mean, it's a documentary. It's about Frida. The cool thing about it is it's in her own words. So everything you hear, it's narrated by someone reading from her real journals, right? And I think the thing that struck me about it was that I know Frida's work as an artist, right? I know the pieces she's done over the years. I'm familiar with that. And yet it really kind of gives you that look behind the curtain. Her emotions, her feelings behind, I mean, whether it's behind the work or just behind things that were happening in her life. And some of it was actually kind of revealing. Like, I just didn't realize the dynamic of her relationship with Diego, right? Being able to shed some light on it, but also show how it connected to her work. I remember the first time I really started to look into her work, and I mean, this was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or so. And some of the work I didn't really understand, and maybe that's because I was just not at the right point in life. I don't know. But also, it doesn't necessarily make sense entirely if you don't know maybe some of the personal struggles and the personal issues she had to deal with. So this film is one that kind of opens the doors on that, right? So now you can get to see like, oh, this is why this work looks this way or has this in it. Whether it's finding the journals or finding photographs of her, or, I mean, there's even some footage of her assembling all of that stuff, doing all that research. It really shows in this film. Some of the things that are in the film that she's writing about in her journals and that are included in this film, they're not necessarily flattering about her, but it's honest and it's real. And I think it does inform how you see the work. I really thought it was eye-opening in that way. Talking to Victor about the music, that's something that, if you watch the film, and by the way, the film is available on Amazon Prime now. So that's something, if you didn't make it to the festival, you can still see it there if you have that. Some of this artwork brought to life in the way that it is. And with Victor, his music throughout, he's very inventive and very resourceful and out of the box, right? Or he just uses some very unconventional methods to build a soundscape for the film. And it's just such a unique way to assemble that. It kind of reminded me of, in a sense, was the documentary Moon Age Daydream. I talked about that a while back in one of the episodes, but it's a documentary about David Bowie, and it's using all of his interviews or just him talking on maybe TV. He's narrating his own documentary, basically. And it's using footage from concerts, from photo sessions, from TV appearances, from films, using all that throughout this documentary, right? And so it's kind of like reassembling, remixing everything we already have, but into something that really builds a consistent and revealing story. This, Frida, is very much in that vein, I think. It does it a little bit differently in the sense that it takes the time to take us with her. We're not just kind of floating in a bunch of ideas and not really clearly defining a time in a person's life. Frida is specifically about these points in her life, right? When she was young, when she met Diego, when they had their marital troubles, when she found an independence with her work and in her life, and then even getting back with Diego and their relationship and ultimately up until the time that she passed. The documentary really does a great job of kind of laying that out in a pretty distinct way. And so I thought it was really great. I mean, if you're into art, visual art, fine art, this is something I think you should really see because it's not only an examination of her and her work and her life, but it is kind of reflecting, I think, what a lot of creative folks, musicians, writers, filmmakers, of course, I think we all have a sense of you have to find a balance somehow between life and your art or let's say your passion for your art. And for better or worse, my takeaway was like Frida and even Diego, their passion was for their work and not so much about their relationship or their, let's say, regular life, And look, they were successful and people talk about them still to this day. So was it wrong? What was the cost? You could go the other way and say, well, I want to have stability and I want to have, let's say, a quote unquote normal life, but you may not be able to dedicate the same amount of time into being a successful or world-renowned artist, right? So there's maybe a balance in there because there are plenty of people who have both and they are happy and successful and they're able to say what they want and do what they want. But it is something here. This film shows like it can go the other way. It can get away from you to the point where the way that this film shows that Frida, she didn't ignore her health, but because of injuries when she was young, the health issues that she faced, they were always there. And she tried to push through and she did, but they ultimately caught up to her and took her away from us too soon. So again, a very eye-opening and somewhat moving look at the life of this artist that so many people celebrate, and rightly so. But maybe you can see another side, see a little deeper. And so after that, look, I want to talk about a couple of others here. Of course, I want to shout out The Long Game. It was an important film, I think, for the festival. It certainly tells the story of a part of Texas history that I don't think a lot of people knew. And of course, it's related to golf. Golf is kind of the backdrop of the whole thing. I'm not a golf person. It has never really made a lot of sense to me. I get how it works. I mean, it's a pretty simple game, I think, when you break it down, right? But it seems never mind. This is not about my feelings on golf. This film, it's looking at Texas history. It's looking at Latino history. It's looking at different generations within those, let's say, two lines of history. And it's even looking at the experience of men and women in a specific point in time. There's so many different angles you could take this. And I think that's probably part of the appeal of the story. What I got from even talking to the director and a couple of the actors in the film, it was interesting to see the perspective of someone who is from Texas. So the younger actors that I talked to, they're from Texas. One, let's see, Christian is from, if I remember right, I think he's from Houston. And Paulina is from El Paso, if I remember. And Julio, who directed the film, he's not from here. He's from California, but I mean, of course, still part of the culture, and did spend a lot of time in Texas, and even worked with Terrence Malick on two pretty amazing films, I think. The Tree of Life and To the Wonder, which, I was telling somebody about To the Wonder when we were there at the festival, and it was like, this is one of Malick's real, like, underappreciated, underrated works, I think. I don't know. Something about that film I just really connected with, and it hits in a certain way. I don't know. There's a lot of his more recent films that I haven't seen, but the reason I bring up Malick and Julio's kind of familiarity and working with him is that seeing The Long Game. So I got to say a couple things. I have to thank, first of all, Mucho Mas Media, which was helpful in getting me a screener, and I suppose bringing the film to the festival. But so I tried to watch a screener because I tried to watch all of these films where I was going to talk to a filmmaker, because I wanted to really talk to them. I didn't want to just, have it be empty conversation. So I watched this screener for The Long Game, and unfortunately, because of time and where I was able to do it, I had to watch it on my iPad. Oh, I hear everybody groaning right now. I hear you. And there's something about the way this film is shot, the way it's edited, and I think I know what it is, but seeing it on a small screen, on a device, man, it doesn't do it justice. It actually honestly, it kind of hurts it in a way. And I'm sure that is why filmmakers don't want their films watched on it. They don't want you watching your film on a phone. Ask David Lynch. Look it up. You know what I'm talking about. But at the festival, I sat in on the screening, and watching that film, The Long Game, on the big screen, now it made sense. There's something about the screen and the way the film is shot, and I'm sure it's a deliberate choice, but it's similar to Malick. And I don't know if that's just a stylistic touch that Julio picked up. I should have asked him. Man, that's the one question I didn't ask. Hey, cool, thanks. I'm a loser. Still, watching the film on the big screen, it reminded me a lot of Malick. A lot of like wide angle lenses, but the camera like hangs on it, like locks on a character's face. And yet it just kind of floats and drifts a little bit. And it feels a little disorienting when you watch it on a small screen. On the big screen, it feels, I don't know, it feels kind of magical. It feels sort of poetic in a way. And of course, that is exactly, or especially with Malick's more recent films, that is exactly his style. And it works. I mean, I think it works for those kinds of stories. Here, I mean, this is not necessarily that type of story that maybe you'd see in a Terrence Malick film, but it has a certain, a sense of place and time. You know, taking place in a very specific community in Texas during the 50s, with the characters, the wardrobe and the settings being what they are. I think it does, when you see on the big screen, that way that it's shot, it does help transport you to that place and that time. And so I can see it now, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort or the thought to do it that way. The other thing I'll say about the film, you know, so Cheech was there at the festival, and his role in the film is not as prominent as you would think, I guess. Of course, Jay Hernandez and Dennis Quaid are really the two main leads, plus all the younger cast, the let's say the kids in the film. But Cheech does come in at very key moments, and he even comes in at a moment and really kind of drives the point of the film home. And I think at this point, for the long game, the impact is not so much about golf. I mean, Julio said it himself. He doesn't necessarily consider it a golf film. It's not a sports film, but that is kind of the backdrop of the film. It's more about these boys, the 5 young men who are trying to be golfers, and JB Pena, who wants to be their coach and is fighting for access, fighting for equality, fighting for recognition. That's the story. So let me get to a couple others here. Let me get to Allá, right? This film hit me in a way that I wasn't so, all right, let me tell you about the film, I guess. It's about a man who is from Mexico. He's coming back home to Mexico, small town. And he's coming back because his father is dying. He was the postman, right? So Oscar is basically having to like take over, figure out what to do with the post office and the people that kind of rely on that, and just everybody there in the small town. To me, this is a very specific pull, but if you're familiar with the show Northern Exposure, it was an old TV show from, I think, like the 90s, early 90s maybe. But it's about a doctor who goes to Alaska, and it's such a small little town there, and he has to learn how to adjust to their speed and their ways. And this is sort of like that. It's a little more like he's coming home. Oscar is coming home. So it's more that he's just having to reacquaint himself with how things are here versus how things were where he was, right? A little more modern, a little more contemporary. Here, it's much slower pace. They don't have internet. They barely have ways to communicate. You know, there's not a lot going on. And a lot of the men have left. And because they left like he has, right? They've gone to either the US or they've just gone to try and make a living. So he comes back to this town, and it's almost all women. And it's women of all ages, women of all types. And he's just found himself in a place where he's kind of a fish out of water, right? He doesn't really feel like he fits, even though this is where he's from. And at the same time, I mean, he's just, he's trying to understand everybody's goals. And that's the other side of this film, though. And this is what I really wanted to talk to Monserrat about, was the perspective of the women around Oscar and their individual stories and struggles. Because I think, Oscar is the protagonist. He's like the main character, but I think this film is really about those women. Whether they're younger, older, whether they are married or single or want to be married or want to be single, their relationships with him and with each other, I think that really is the meat of the film. And I think the strength of the film really comes down to the decision that these characters make. You know, everything is shot and put together in such a naturalistic and an authentic way. It doesn't feel unnecessarily or like gratuitously like gritty, you know, because it takes place in a small town Mexico, but you know, we're not going into all the tropes of like violence or drugs or crime. It is about just regular people and dealing with relationships. And honestly, dealing with them in a pretty fair way, I think. You know, Oscar is not in there like, what is it, like a rooster in a hen house. That's not his game. That's not what this film is. He's there to just settle some things that he needs to settle. And he has to deal with these women because they're there. But he also maybe finds a different or a better understanding and respect for their struggles. And I think as an audience, we kind of go along with that, because I certainly felt that. And I feel like that's honestly a more realistic and a more respectful way to show how men and women, how that relationship can go sometimes. Because, of course, the more dramatic way, I guess, would be like, oh, there's some kind of fling over here and then a fling over there. And then it turns into just a mess, right? It gets real messy. But this film tries to, I think, really ride that line of being authentic and being thoughtful about real people and the relationships that they have together. And so I talked to Montserrat about that, and I feel like I was able to see that, you know, the compassion that she shows in writing these characters and giving them a sense of strength and independence and being on their own and having to find their own way and being okay with that and not necessarily like waiting for a man. I mean, the one character we see do that, we see that it doesn't necessarily work out so well. So it's about these other women who also, they're just moving forward with life. And I think that's a great story to tell. So let's see, what else did we see? Another film that I saw that actually turned out to be the winner for Best Narrative Feature was a film called Shame, or in Spanish, Vergüenza. And that was an interesting film. It's about a young man who he and his friend are trying out for baseball. They're trying to get on a team, and they take this bus ride. They're going to the tryouts, and the bus in the middle of the night gets pulled over. They get detained. The police are pulling people off the bus, supposedly checking for, I don't know, contraband or weapons or whatever. But it turns out they're not the police, you know, pretty shady characters. And they end up making several of the passengers, the men, and including these two guys, they make them fight each other to the death. And the idea being that this is purportedly, this is a thing that has happened or has been known to happen, where whether it's cartels or gangs, they basically kind of recruit people in by this sort of gladiator style showdown. And I mean, it's cruel, it's barbaric, it's inhumane, and yet if it really is a thing that happens, this is the kind of fear that, I mean, whether you're a young person or in the case of this film, the family of someone, it's a real scary thought to think that this could be your fate. And what we see is these two guys, the one that wins the fight, he makes his way out, he escapes and makes his way back home. And he's stuck with the guilt of what he's done. Not only has he fought and killed his friend, he had to bury him. Then he still had to escape and then still find his way back home. And when he's faced with everybody there, including the other boy's family, asking him, like, where is he? Have you seen him? And he knows very well, but he can't bring himself to admit what he's done or even acknowledge that he might even know. And so he carries this shame. He carries this guilt. And there's something about the performances in this film that they're so subtle and so nuanced. You really feel it, man. You really see it on this character's face. The way it's portrayed, where this young boy, he's trying to find a way to maybe carry on with life, but he just can't. I mean, this is too much to carry, this pain, this guilt of knowing what has happened. And so some of it is just an examination of how people can repress emotions and maybe their own moral decisions. You know, it's a really interesting look at this, because it's not someone who he doesn't run away from home. He goes back home and dealing with his friend's family, the parents, the sister, and trying to, in a way, try to comfort them, but not really, because he doesn't even have the tools. This is traumatic. This is real trauma that he's gone through. And I think, you know, aside from the story of it and the emotional themes and even the performances, it's a really well-made film. And, you know, I was able to talk to the filmmakers during the festival, and I wanted them to know, like, I noticed, I made a point to write down some notes about, there is a uncut take, right? It's one long take of these two boys on the bus, and one of them's like watching something on his phone. I think he's watching like a baseball game, and the other one is talking, or they're kind of restless or whatever. It's like in the middle of the night. The bus is just riding along, and the bus pulls over. We see the police officers board the bus. They're starting to pull people off. They pull these two guys off. We see them walk out. They're standing on the side of the road. The bus leaves, and the cops, supposedly, quote unquote cops, they put these guys in a truck. The truck drives off. And it took me a second. I really had to stop and think. And I had to rewind it, actually, and say, wait a minute, we haven't cut yet. It's like it's like a 6-minute shot. It's pretty cool the way they did it, just from a technical standpoint, but it also really puts you in the moment to think that you're just riding a bus, just taking mass transit. And you can go from that to being basically abducted in a matter of minutes. And to think that your whole world can get turned upside down that fast. That is, I think that was the effect. And it works, because you're kind of stuck with, the tension builds in the moment, and not cutting, not breaking away to another angle or anything. It's a really great use of that technique. You know, I remember mentioning that I feel like sometimes it can be a gimmick, but when it's done right and it's done with purpose, it hits and it works. It's no surprise to me that this won. I mean, it was the closing film of the festival, and I think it certainly ended things on the right note. It's an impactful, very kind of heartfelt film. And it's about a struggle that some people, unfortunately, have gone through, and families have gone through. So, great job with that film. I mean, it's one that I really actually want to be able to see again some point. Because here, the other thing is, like, I think it's even commenting on not only guilt and shame and sort of masking your emotions, but also about the nature of kind of withholding the truth, you know, like not being able to be forthright and honest with yourself, with those around you, with your family, your friends, whatever, holding on to that, even if it's destructive, but holding on to that truth, it becomes corrosive, right? Like if you know a secret, but a secret that would help somebody, even if it might hurt you, to not share that, to not tell somebody, that can eat away at you, right? And, you know, that's even beyond the scope of this film, beyond this story. But I think that's one of the cool things about films like this sometimes is they have some deeper messages in them. And this one, I don't know, I kind of really connected with it, you know? I think a lot of us probably do. We've all got secrets. We've all got things we probably don't want to tell people, right? So this was one that, I mean, on a pretty extreme scale, it goes to that length, right? So it's a great film. I really enjoyed it. The last film I want to talk about here was one that I almost wasn't going to be able to watch it or sure if I had time, but I was able to see it, and I want to say it surprised me, but it really blew me away. Like it was a great experience. And that is a film called Autumn. And that is by director Antonio Sequeira. And the film is about a family. It's a mother and father and their adult son and daughter. And the idea, I think, is that it takes place over a year, over 4 seasons, from autumn, winter, spring, summer, to the following autumn, right? The film is kind of broken up that way into those sorts of chapters, let's say. But there's so much that happens in that, let's say, proverbial year, because I think it is a little more like when you watch the characters and you watch how they age and how they change, it feels like it's actually over the course of like 2 or 3 years. But I think that is the metaphor that it's trying to build, is that people change over time. And in this case, this family, I mean, they're going through a pretty significant moment for a lot of families. And look, me personally, that's exactly where I am in life. You know, I have a 21-year-old son, I have a 19-year-old daughter, and they are at that point in life where they are taking a new path, and they're leaving childhood behind. And being me and my wife, being parents that don't really know how to handle that, and maybe we're still stuck in the mode of having children, going to that mode of living with or being the parents of adults. It's a weird place to be. I mean, there's no denying it. And if you're a parent and you have grown children, you know what it is. If you have young children, just wait. It's going to happen. It's going to be weird as hell. But the great thing with this film is that it's honest about it. All of these characters, all 4 of these characters, we see their perspectives individually. And it's not just, you know, the film kind of starts with the son turning 18, and he's going to university. He's going from Portugal to London. So there's an element of him leaving the house and how the rest of the family is dealing with that. But we do take time to see all of the other characters and their perspectives. The father, we're seeing that he seems like he's kind of getting, I don't know, like he's falling behind in terms of his like his awareness, like his sensibility. Like he's the one, he makes the kind of, you know, kind of racist, kind of crude jokes. He doesn't really get technology. He doesn't want to be in the city. They live in this small, isolated area, and he likes that life. The mother is the one that you can see, you can feel. She's like kind of holding on to her son, even though he's gone. And there's even a great moment in the film where we break away from the story for a second, and we jump back in time to see the mother and father as a younger adults, and it's almost like a dream-like kind of moment where the mother is carrying her baby, the baby boy, let's say, and the father is walking ahead of her on the beach. And every time the camera cuts between the mother and the father, when we cut back to the mother, the boy is older. And we cut back to the father, he's further away. He's further up the beach. You see that the mother is essentially feeling like she is being left behind in a different way, being left behind by her husband in a sense, because she's burdened with the attachment to her son as a mother. And, you know, when I talked to Antonio, he really went into his thought there and the metaphor that he was trying to draw. And it's real. It's a real thing that I think a lot of mothers, a lot of women go through, fathers also, but specifically women, I think. And even the daughter, right? The sister, let's say, she's like not far behind him. So she's also feeling the same draw, like to leave home, to do something, but to do something different and to really cut a whole new path and not be the daughter that those parents want, but she's really trying to find her own way. And it can be frustrating. It can be scary. And we see that. We see that on all of their faces. We see that in the things that they do. And I think all of that stuff is realistic. Like that's what really happens with families, with young people, with parents. Everybody is, it's a weird place to be. No joke. And this film really captures it. It's really cool. I mean, it's probably of all the films, it's the one that I think I connected with the most, just from personal experience. And I of course, that's the great thing about films is something I connect with so deeply. Maybe somebody else doesn't quite get. Maybe they're not at that point in life. They haven't had a similar experience. But for me, this was really it for me. And look, there's even some really great camera work, some editing, some music in the film. There's just so much craft that you can see on the screen. I made sure to mention that because I think it's really cool that in this film, during the seasons, let's say every chapter, you see this family and you see them in this moment of let's say having dinner, having a meal. And the first time we see it, the camera it's another thing like Shame, where it's a long uncut take. It's like 6.5 minutes long. And it's wild because it's 4 characters in the same little space. They're moving around this room. The dialogue is constant. They are all talking and interacting with each other. They're preparing a meal. They're sitting down to eat. They're having the meal. And meanwhile, the camera's moving all around the whole room. So it's not like just stuck on a tripod somewhere. It is a Steadicam shot that constantly moves. And there's so many things. I mean, if you just listen to the dialogue even, there's so many things that are happening. There are layers of people saying things and not saying things, you know? That kind of sometimes awkward conversation, but also the sister and the brother having their own moment and the parents having their own moment, all in this scene. It's a highly technical, highly complicated scene, and it's pulled off so well, and it's not a gimmick. It serves a purpose because the next time we see it, the next time we see these people having another meal, but it's time, sometime later, right? So time has passed. Things have changed for them. Well, it's shot in an entirely different way. It's shot with them looking straight into the camera as they look across the table to talk to everyone else. It's very static. It's kind of stiff, and all the characters are detached. You know, there's no 2 shots. There's no wide shot of the whole table. And the next time, it's done even differently. It's just a thing that I noticed watching the film. Is like, this is a very specific choice. And that right there alone tells me, like, okay, we're in good hands. We are watching a film by somebody who knows what he's doing. And that's a great feeling to have as a viewer, as an audience, to know that I may not be able to predict where this film is going or what's about to happen to these characters, but I feel like wherever it does go, we're okay. I'm down. I'm ready for this ride. And so, and look, the other thing is, this is Antonio's feature debut, right? This is his first feature film. He's done some other shorts. My understanding is he's even done some TV work. So this being like his first feature full length, I think it's a great debut. And it's one of those that is like, I got to see what he's going to do next. He's on my radar. I got stock in him now. So this one, I don't know if this would be something. All of these films, really, I'm curious to know when they will be available or where they could be available to watch someday. I mean, I know Frida is on Amazon Prime now. I think The Long Game is going to be available, or I guess in theaters in April, so very soon here. But some of these others, that's sometimes the frustrating thing with festivals is some of these films, they're so great and the stories are so interesting and unique. And sometimes it's hard to know when you might ever see them again. But just keep an eye out for them, right? And that's why, look, so as I kind of wrap this up here, I do want to kind of close this out. There's a lot of great films. And look, those are the ones that I saw. I saw a few others. I saw lots of shorts, all the filmmakers I talked about at the beginning. But there are plenty of other films that I didn't even get to. So I want to be able to acknowledge and link to and let you be able to follow these filmmakers and their projects. So if you listen to this, go to filmstreak.com, and where this episode is at, I'll drop as many links as I can in the post, in the description. I've tried to connect with as many filmmakers and as many projects as I could. And so that way you can follow them and see where these projects go, even just see what they do next. I think that's really important. That's the great thing about festivals is not only you get to see the work, sometimes you get to meet the people that made the work. And it gives you an idea of like, oh, this is somebody I want to follow, or this is a type of project that I want to see more of, right? It's always great. There's always something to find that will get your attention, that may move you, that may challenge you. And yet I wish more people could be able to experience it. And look, if you're listening to this and it's because we connected there, I'm glad you were able to come. I'm glad we were able to meet and talk, and just if we did an interview together, hey, appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you and great to talk about your work. In the meantime, I guess, I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to go watch some more new movies. Go to IMDb. I've got the list, right? Over 400 films now. Every film that I've talked about. You can add it to your list. You can, review it, or you can just find out where you can watch it. Until next time, you know what to do. Go watch something new.